Imagine asking someone to step off the porch onto the street. It's a small change. You can extend your hand and actually help them take the 6-inch step down. And they'll likely do it without hesitation, right? Especially knowing you're there to support them and embrace them during that subtle change. Now imagine asking them to strap on a parachute and jump out an airplane at 20,000 feet. The scale of the change matters. Resistance grows exponentially with the magnitude of the leap. So how do we manage resistance when the stakes and the changes are big? Stay tuned to find out. If you're ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about change management, this episode is for you. We will cover why traditional fairness-based approaches fail miserably, repeatedly, when it comes to managing massive, deadline-driven transformations, especially initiatives as ambitious as what's going to be needed to contrast the Agenda 2030 campaign. My solution is branding America. A lot of people may not understand what it's all about as they left right through their days full of complaints and misery, but yet wishing to do nothing different about it. When you look at it on a historical national scale, throughout history, large-scale changes, whether political, social, technological, or cultural, have often been met with significant resistance. In my observation, if you're not making a big enough change, that's when there's no resistance. I see a lot of companies, a lot of brands, they're applauding themselves on what they define as success, right? But it's easy to get people to do something that doesn't require them to do anything different. Like branding and marketing on a product level is easy to a person like me. Come use our product versus uses their product. Totally different than are you with the United States or are you with America? So what we're going to do is we're going to cover first a couple examples, all right? Some national initiatives, the brands, societal transformations, and then we're going to go over the cause and effect of why fairness fails. Like, I remember when I was leading some change, culture change at 3M, and I was like having a conversation with someone who felt like, well, you should ask the people what they want. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I know what they need. See, the difference between asking them what they want and knowing what they need is because most people don't know what they don't know, and they're going to tell you what they want, not realizing if it is or how far away it actually is from what they need, because they want to be comfortable when change requires discomfort. So these examples highlight the ingrained habits of the fear and the unknown that creates a resistance to the disruption that shape the trajectory of every significant change or impact in the United States and possibly the world. So if you're in a position like DEI and all this other stuff, and you feel like you're making change and you don't have no resistance, you most likely need to review your goals, because they're probably not significant enough and nobody really cares because you're not making a difference. So the adoption of the metric system, right? The historical context is in the 1970s, the US government attempted to transition from the imperial system to the metric system to align with international standards. The resistance was the public saw it as unnecessary and overly complicated. Cultural identity was tied to the imperial system, and there was pushback against adopting a system perceived as foreign. Businesses resisted due to the high cost of retooling production lines and changing product labels. See, that's change. And when you have change on the line, you have significant resistance. The outcome was the effort failed, and the US remains one of the few countries not fully using the metric system. The brand impact was companies like Coca-Cola and others experimented with metric labeling, like liters instead of ounces, but the backlash forced them to maintain the dual labeling systems, right? Now, if you don't have any resistance, if you ain't got no haters, you ain't doing something right. Prohibition, 1920, 1933, the historical context. The U.S. passed the 18th Amendment, so-called banning the production, sale, and transportation of alcohol. Huge resistance. This is North Carolina I'm in the vicinity of. NASCAR was born off of this prohibition. Widespread opposition from citizens who value personal freedom and cultural traditions around drinking. The rise of underground speakeasies, bootlegging operations, organized crime flourished as a direct result of the ban. The outcome was enforcing prohibition became virtually impossible, leading to its repeal in 1933 with the 21st Amendment. Brand impact, alcohol brands like Anheuser-Busch had to pivot during Prohibition, producing near beer, non-alcoholic beer, and other products like ice cream just to survive, only for them to come back later on and say, you know what, never mind. We're gonna go back to the way it was. Just think about that. A few more days in the wrong direction, Budweiser, Bush, none of them might be here today. How would that change your little joke? Well, sports means joke. So your little NBA finals or NFL soap opera, right? If you didn't have these companies in existence today because some fool thought they were going to make a change in a way that was pacifying. What about the women's suffrage movement? Women fought for the right to vote in what you call the United States, culminated into the passage of the 19th Amendment in the hearsay of 1920. And the resistance was many men and even women believed suffrage would disrupt traditional gender roles, right? So the arguments were made that women lacked the knowledge or ability to participate in politics. We know how that went. Businesses and industries reliant on traditional gender norms resisted societal change, social changes that could empower women in the workplace. The outcome was, despite decades of resistance, women secured the right to vote, reshaping both politics and society. The brand impacts like Ivory Soap began to align with the modern quote-unquote woman, reflecting the new societal role of women. You got your basic civil rights movements, 1950s, 1970s. Historical context, the fight for racial equality and desegregation in the US led to sweeping reforms. including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The resistance came from the southern states' desegregation efforts, leading to violent clashes like Little Rock, Nine, Selma marches, etc., where white-owned businesses, quote unquote, and institutions initially resisted integration. Many Americans feared that societal changes would disrupt the way of life. Well, duh, that's what change does, right? So, outcome was despite the resistance, systemic changes were implemented, though the struggle for racial equalities continues. The brand impact was some brands such as Coca-Cola publicly supported racial integration to solidify their reputation, while others stayed neutral or resisted change, which eventually tarnished their image. What about the Industrial Revolution, right? We're not talking about, hey, do you want Coke or Pepsi? See, when you're at McDonald's or you go to another restaurant, you're a Coca-Cola fan and they don't have Coke, they got Pepsi, you'll drink Pepsi probably because it's not the end of the world. See, it didn't take much for you to make a change, Michael Jackson. All right. But when you got something big, I talk to these people and they're like, no, my client base is this and, everything's going great and we're doing all this wonderful work. And I'm like, well, how's your resistance level? And they're like, nah, we don't have any resistance. And when they tell me that they don't have any resistance, I know at that point, they're not making a real significant impact. A lot of people are naive and they just want to be told, they just want to be pacified. So if you put a little nipple in their mouth, they'll pay for it, right? And you feel like you have a successful brand. But all you're really doing is transferring currency from somebody who don't know what they don't know, who still don't know what they don't know. When you're making a significant impact or a significant change, or you're driving down that road, you are going to have resistance. That is how we measure voltage. It's the potential difference. This is why when there's a huge change to overcome, you need a great amount of voltage, or there's a great amount of voltage. It's the potential difference. If there's not a significant potential difference, then the power needed is weak in a circuit. So in the Industrial Revolution, the historical context, the transition from the agrarian, if I pronounce that right, societies to industrialized economies in the 18th and 19th century, so-called supposedly transformed work, cities, and economies. Some may say, that was already inherited in existence, but that's another conversation. So workers feared losing jobs to machines. Sound familiar? Leading to the Luddite or Luddite, Luddite movement. So workers started destroying the machinery in protest, and traditionalists resisted urbanization and a shift from rural life to factory-driven cities. There was widespread concern about the exploitation of labor, including child labor. The outcome was industrialization prevailed, revolutionizing production and economies, though it caused significant societal upheavals, i.e., change. The brand impact, companies like Ford Motor Company emerged as pioneers by embracing industrialization and creating the assembly line, while others clung to outdated methods that were left behind. The rise of environmental regulations, all these green people and green conversations and green movements, right? Where do you think that came from? Historical context was the 1960s or 70s approximately. Environmental movements led to government regulations like Clean Air Act 1970 and the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. The resistance was industries such as coal, oil, and manufacturing resisted. They didn't want these regulations, citing increased costs and economic harm. Lobbyists pushed back against legislation that required pollution reduction and clean technologies. The outcome was environmental policies became a cornerstone of modern governance. Though resistance from industries persists to this day, the brand impacts like BP, Chevron initially resisted change, but later, rebranded themselves as environmentally conscious. BP's Beyond Petroleum campaign, right? What about the internet? The digital transformation. Historical context is that the rise of the internet in the 1990s and early 2000s for the late people, right, revolutionized how businesses operated and how people communicated. Like, I still to this day, like, I remember being I don't know how old I was, maybe 14, 15. I had a two-way, I bought my own two-way pager. Like when the SkyTels came out, like we were doing things when we were young. I had one. I ain't had the big boy one like the NBA players and stuff. I had the little one. But I could type in a message back then, and not only would it send it to your pager, I could send it to your house phone, and the computer would call your house and tell you, y'all, my RAM is outside, come outside, blah, 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 blah. So when I talk to people today, it's like, oh my God, man, you sent me a text message. It was two pages long. I'm like, shut the fuck up. The text is a communication. We grew up on text message. We don't have no complaints. We know that. People who just got their shit like 5-10 years ago are bothered by the technology still because they don't know the value of communication. They haven't been fully immersed in the change since having pen pals and having to write letters through the post office. They're slow. So the rise of the internet allowed businesses and people to communicate better. The traditional media companies, right, here's who they sound like. The traditional media companies resisted the digital disruption, clinging to print and broadcast models. Retail giants like Sears, where did they go? And Blockbuster, where did they go? Underestimated the internet's impact, leading to their decline. Many consumers were initially wary of e-commerce. And all y'all clicking Amazon, fearing online scams and the loss of in-person shopping experience. Now, the outcome was digital transformation reshaped industries, as we talked about. It changed relationships. You're mad at your spouse right now because you text her text her or him at 9:30 today a.m. and you ain't heard back from them yet. It changed everything. Digital transformation reshaped industries because you know that when you send a text message, you know they see it, and you know it takes 18 seconds to reply. And honestly, there's no excuse why you don't get a response in the next 10 minutes in most cases. But see, the word respect, the etymology of the word respect is to relate. So what you have is toxicity there, but that's another conversation. So the digital transformation reshaped industries, creating tech giants like Amazon and Google while leaving the resistant companies behind. As we can see, the brand impacts like Netflix embraced change early, transitioning from DVD rentals to streaming, while others like Blockbuster failed to adapt. Is the United States Blockbuster and America Netflix? What about the fight against smoking? The historical context in the mid-20th century, public awareness campaigns and government regulations targeted smoking due to its health risks. And the same people who told you we're going to target smoking due to its health risks have now opened up dispensaries for what they call weed or marijuana in every neighborhood. The resistance originally was tobacco companies like Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds resisted by funding misleading research. Fake news! Fake news! There's a lot of that going around. Like people spreading rumors about you and stuff like that. The idiots just love to consume shit without checking it. That's how you got here today, right? And the country's in the condition that it's in today. Because the word believe means not to know. So R.J. Reynolds resisted by funding misleading research and aggressive marketing campaigns. Smokers resisted the anti-smoking laws, viewing them as infringements on personal freedom. Thank you, America. Restaurants, bars, and other businesses opposed smoking bans, fearing they would lose customers. The outcome was smoking rates declined significantly due to what they call education, regulation, and cultural shifts. The brand impact was many tobacco brands suffered blows to their reputation, while others pivoted into alternative products like e-cigarettes, who's now on the chopping block. What about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare? The historical context, 2010. Affordable Care Act aimed to reform healthcare in the U.S., expanding access to millions of uninsured Americans. Huge resistance. Political opponents criticized the act as government overreach. Insurance companies and employers pushed back against new regulations and costs. Many feared changes to their existing healthcare plans. It's funny how when you really are wanting to change something, people say that they fear change. It's just really that simple. No, we fear change. We want change, but we fear change. That's resistance. So again, when I talk to these business owners who are like, no, we don't have any resistance. I'm like, well, you don't have any real impact. So the outcome on that, going back to Obamacare, was despite ongoing challenges and opposition, the ACA became the cornerstone of the U.S. healthcare policy. The brand impact was the healthcare companies like Aetna, United Health Group adapted by developing ACA compliant plans, while others struggled to adjust. And this is why you're watching today, why traditional organizational justice fails in large-scale, deadline-driven changes when you want to talk about fairness. While organizational justice and fairness-based approaches are common practice, we want to be fair. That's pacification. All right? We want to be fair. Based approaches, the research demonstrates that they are insufficient and often ineffective for massive deadline-driven transformations, like trying to get sustainable communities together implemented before Agenda 2030. Which, how many of y'all know what Agenda 2030 is? I'm not expecting you to go watch all the documentaries and read the papers. The quote for you to make it make sense, you may have heard this, is you will own nothing and be happy. You think I'm just out here pushing branding and marketing just because it's cool? No, this is a strategic, business is war. The question is, who are you at war with? Are you a nail tech and you're just at war with the Asian group down the street? Are you doing hair and you're just trying to get more clients than the braiders, the Africans across down the block? Like that's what I'm saying. That's not change. That's not impactful. Okay, you came up with a new style. Israel and Iran are like replacing the NBA finals as who you got in the finals right now. Your box braids aren't going to save your community. So the traditional approaches fail to address the complexity, the urgency, and the scale of such changes. The limitations of traditional organizational justice, the conventional wisdom. This is why when people are, oh, you don't got no common sense. No, you're right. I don't have common sense. My 34 Wonderlic score is top 2% in the nation. That's uncommon. That's extraordinary. The conventional wisdom that fairness and support can mitigate resistance falls short in large-scale, deadline-driven changes for several reasons. Hence why my Greenbelt career was so successful, because like I'm just hardwired to be like, fuck the bullshit. This is what we got to do. And this is where we're going. And this is how we're going to get there. And then you got people like, we don't like how he made us feel. And oh my God, how are you going to say that to us? And we want to be fair. And meanwhile, the world is falling apart. Because the last thing people remember the most is how you made them feel. Imagine being the people standing around for 25 years talking about how the fuck they feel. And then they feel the heat from a thermonuclear explosion detonated above their city because they were too worried about how they felt that they didn't make a difference. Yeah, you're going to have some feelings one way or another. High failure rates despite fair practices is documented. 60 to 80% of large-scale organizational changes fail even when employing fairness-based approaches. Why do you think that is? Traditional justice frameworks prove too slow and inflexible for urgent, large-scale transformations. Like, people are super excited about websites because of what it was to have a website 25 years ago. They can just now get access to it. So they feel the prestige of having a website because 25 years ago, a website cost you $30,000. Now you're online bragging about the global fiber connect you had that you paid $125 for your little scroll, and you could have done that on Facebook. You're late in that example. Psychological impact under pressure. Rapid mandatory changes trigger heightened resistance and stress regardless of the perceived fairness. Again, if you don't have any resistance, you're not making no real impact. You need to reconsider. You might be having revenue. You might have what you call income. You might be getting some cash, but you ain't making no change. Teams shift from creative problem solving to a just finish it mindset under tight deadlines without the proper leadership. Chronic deadline pressure leads to anxiety and burnout that spreads through teams, undermining morale. And this is why, these are all why people be like, oh, change? Oh, no, you know what? You hit their phone. That's why they're not responding to you, because you represent change. As soon as they see you, they start to feel the anxiety. Oh shit, here come this month. You can already talk about we need to change the world. and I'm just trying to change my drawers is all I can really think about right now. And the only reason you in that position is because your community hasn't worked together to make the world guaranteed as much as possible to be what we want it to be. But they got so many complaints all day, all week long about what it is. And I'm by myself because I've never been the type to just sit around and complain without doing something. I'd rather take action, lose everything in the attempt than to just sit there and take that shit. So I can't relate to people who just sit there and do nothing. Because structural reality versus perceived fairness is number 3. When facing significant structural changes, resource constraints and shifting roles override perceived fairness, which is why you hear me advocating for getting rid of the currency. Because you can't have equality when it comes to the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in a currency-based society. That's why you're all running around here talking about the game is rigged for y'all. And instead of doing something about it, now you want to talk about we're going to embrace Bitcoin. Like, it still has the word currency on there. Any currency, all you're doing is what? You're changing from the African braid shop down the street to Tamika's. You're still getting the weave put in. Communication and support alone cannot offset the impact of non-negotiable changes. See, when people want to talk, oh, ask them what they want, and then you got 27 different, you got 50 people you're going to ask what they want in a little workplace. They're going to give you 27 different answers. You're not going to have fairness there anyway. Only a dumb leader would say that is possible. You're not going to implement 27 different people, and the moment you leave one person's request out, it's not fair. So you know what? Fuck it. What I do is I don't base shit off emotion. Everybody that's talked to me know I strip all the emotion from the shit. I'm a computer. I'm Johnny 5 off Short Circuit. What we do is we base it off the ROI factor. Now there's no need to have emotion. There's no crying in baseball. All right? This is the mission. We need to get to this rendezvous, and we need to be there by 0700. And you either be there or you get left. We either gonna live tomorrow or we gonna die in the process. Which one is it gonna be for you? Oh, you gonna take captivity. Oh, you gonna take enslavement. Oh, you gonna take somebody else owning your kids. Oh, you gonna take someone else telling you what your minimum wage is. Oh, you gonna take someone else telling you when you gotta go to bed as an adult so that you can be on the production line at 7 o'clock. Oh, you gonna complain about the gas prices being too hot. Oh, you gonna complain about rent tripled in the last 10 years. Traditional approaches fail to address deep-seated inequalities. And that's why they cannot work. The traditional ways cannot work in with massive changes. It only works in, do you want a Big Mac from McDonald's or do you want a Whopper from Burger King? Do you want Nike or Adidas? Are you a Steelers fan or do you like the Eagles? Can we convert you? Critical insight, the relationship between procedural justice and actual change outcomes is tenuous at best, right? There's limitations. Matter of fact, here. Give me 1 second. All right. So, key limitations table, right? Fair communication. Fair communication is insufficient for deep structural changes. Like, I laugh at the people all the time. And it's after I spent a long time trying to help them understand. If you've ever worked at a workplace where you send any type of messages, matter of fact, go back to the text message thing. We've all heard the buzzword clear and concise messaging, clear and concise. I did a video on it, by the way, if you want to check the channel, showing you the hypocrisy of clear and concise, because the word clear means unobstructed, full view. When you want to have your windshield on your car squeegeed and it's clean, that's a full unobstructed view. You see everything except, the pillars. I'm not talking about that, but if you look at the window itself, unobstructed. Now it's a mud puddle, the truck comes by, splashes the car, the windshield gets covered, the mud sticks on half the windshield, you're looking through it, it's like this. That is concise. Concise is incomplete, fragmented. So here's what happens. You send the person a text message. Now your phone, shit, it's 2025. Most of us that are efficient Virgos, right? We're sending you a text message from the computer. We don't even see the little, that whole thing about how many, I don't know, that was like 1998 when the text messages, we used to be like, oh, it's sending 2 text messages in characters. We got to be concerned about how many we're sending because they charge you per, like, that was 98. That was almost 30 years ago. Like, you just got that complaint today because you late, right? So we're sending you a message from the computer. So we type in like it's an email because I don't want it to go to your email, because who checks their email every 10 minutes? But your phone is going to give you an instant alert. Ding. And then it'll be there for you as in deposition when you get to it. Like, that's, but then at the same time, don't take 5 days to tell me you got it or say something about it. The first thing in customer service you want to do is send an acknowledgement statement, or say an acknowledgement statement if you're on the phone. But people don't know what they don't know. So they create trauma and toxicity, and they wonder why Pasha just cuts them the fuck off. Because if you can't handle a basic text message, how the fuck we gonna implement world change together? It's not that I don't like you as a person, it's that I'm on a different level of business. So fair communication is insufficient for deep structural changes. But we're talking to a generation who just found out they could communicate on a PlayStation 5 on NBA 2K. Employee involvement, right, the traditional approach, cannot overcome urgency and scale. Leadership support is limited impact when changes are non-negotiable. That's what I'm talking about. You ask the people what they want, because y'all in that mindset are worried about, ooh, I hope they like me. Man, fuck that. This is what we got to do. Why we got to do that? You want the long story or the short story? Give us a short story. If we don't get here by this time, everybody gonna die. You want it simple like that? How you feel about it now? Leadership support is going to be limited impact when changes are non-negotiable. You don't want to experience 2030 agenda? You don't want to know what it's like to own nothing in America and supposedly be happy? then these changes that need to be made are non-negotiable, and we got less than 5 years. I don't like the way he said it to me. Fuck you. You're going to be an op working for the other side because you're trying to fit in and be accepted. Perceived fairness, right, is overwhelmed by structural realities. So again, when I hear people and business owners and I ask them, how's your resistance? And they, oh no, we don't have no resistance. Okay. Because here we just define fair communication, employee involvement, and you can replace employee with family, community, spouse, right? Leadership support and perceived fairness all have failure points. So if you're not having any resistance, you're not really promoting no change. You're just running your mouth. You just want to be accepted and be liked. You just want friends. And you got a lot of followers because it's easy and they don't have to do nothing. Right? But you don't want to look at it like that, because then it just, that's the truth, and you won't feel like you've accomplished nothing because, well, you haven't. So structural reality versus perceived fairness. When facing significant structural change, we discussed already, resource constraints and shifting roles override perceived fairness. Communication and support alone cannot offset the impact of non-negotiable changes we talked about. Traditional approaches fail to address deep-seated inequalities. Okay? We clear on that? Now, the critical insight, we went over that, and we are at the point where we're covering why it fails. We went over it for those people that are just joining. We went over the key in the little chart we just showed. So if you missed that, go back and peep that, right? So the use of our product versus a competitor is really a weak change in comparison to, like I said, are you with the United States or America? Effectiveness is essentially lost through direction instead of giving them a true destination. Everybody want to convert you to something. Like I said, are you Pepsi or are you cola? Instead of converting people, give them a destination that we can agree on. Do you want Agenda 2030? Or do you want Pasha Paroh's view of what America should be like? Two different destinations. And then I don't need you to convert you into being a warrior or being, I don't need you to convert into being IT if you're a seamstress. No, then you can actually be who you are and fit into the process of change with your natural skills and be rewarded for your natural talents, because we're going to need everything in America that you enjoy today, because we can't boycott what we have not built the system to replace. Which is why the people running around talking about, you see what we did to Target? We cost them $1 million, $1 billion, and then now they back shopping at Target because they the only ones that had that thing that they want. And then they say Pasha's crazy because Pasha's saying, dummy, give your neighbor some investment and have them start making that product that you like in your own neighborhood. Then you can get it next door, and that way next time China gets upset, you know what I mean, your community will still have it. But I'm the crazy one, and people like us are crazy. So this is why there's gonna be this huge clash, because you're gonna have the people who wanna be babied and pacified, and you're gonna have the people who wanna do it themselves, which wouldn't be a problem, but democracy kind of has a habit of saying, you need to join us. And then that's where it's gonna be the problem. Like you saw that during COVID when your neighbor was 500 feet across the street down the road, called the cops on somebody because they were outside without a mask because somebody 10,000 miles away in DC said. So that 2 years after they say, you know what, we bad, my fault. You don't need to have the mask on. So when they point the finger at us for wanting to actually be American, they're going to send their little AI drones. The United States citizens are going to be the AI drones running around here in their automation process, like the Matrix movie. So we need to have sustainable communities. It's that simple. Or get ready to own nothing and be happy. Now, where do you draw the line and own nothing and be happy? Are your kids going to be your kids anymore? Or do you know that they already belong to the state if you didn't do proper steps? But y'all okay with that because as long as you can go to Target and get a loaf of bread, you don't ask any questions. So resistance is actually a natural reaction. Resistance is a natural reaction. It's a natural human response to change, often driven by fear, uncertainty, or perceived threats. This is why I say, if you don't have any resistance, you not making no impact. The people are sitting there saying, oh, well, that's what I'm already used to. Do you want to use Monday.com? Or do you want to use your scheduler planner? It's the same thing, just how do you want to input the data? So there's not really a change. And people complain about, oh man, I gotta learn this new system and do this, that. You ain't doing shit differently, but typing instead of writing. You're putting it here instead of there. But people's minds are so small that they feel like that's a huge ordeal. And you wondering why it takes $100 today to buy what $2 bought in 1930s? Because you let it. Because you allowed them to strip you of your value. You allowed them to say, hey, you got to work 50 times harder to get that same pair of sneakers. And at the same time, we're going to make it cost 80 times more because you ain't say nothing about it. See, I want to empower you to make 80 times more so that you're not complaining about the cost of the Bentley. I want us all to be riding Bentleys. If you want a Bentley, maybe you want a Ferrari, maybe you want a helicopter. They're going to have the flying cars out soon for 300,000 plus. So, whatever it is that you want to, instead of complaining about why Elon Musk can blow up rockets, I want you to be able to light your fireworks too. But humans, and they 70%, 80% water, right? A lot of the stuff we do is based off electrical impulses, right? Electricity, water, they say it don't mix. But what we do know is that both of them like to take the path of least resistance. So source and observation is going to reinforce the idea that humans, especially when they don't have disciplined minds, enjoy the path of least resistance, seeking the easiest, most rewarding outcomes. Managing resistance, right? Effective change management involves addressing resistance through trust, communication, and involvement. So this suggests that reducing resistance requires creating an environment where people feel supported and understand the benefits of change. In other words, the greatest amount of pacification makes the most people feel most supported. Yet, that reduces the scale of change itself. It's like, again, if you help a person step down off the porch to the street, hold their hand, they're willing to make that change. As we mentioned in the beginning, would they be this equally as willing to jump out of the airplane with you with a parachute at 20,000 feet? It's a greater step, a greater change. So often there's going to be a greater resistance. We're dealing with the magnitude of change here. Larger changes often face greater resistance because they require more significant adjustments from individuals, organizations, etc. That's why if you ain't making no impact, it's easy for you to gain followers because they ain't got to do nothing different. It's easy for you to get clients when it's what they're already used to. But talk to an inventor bringing a totally new concept or new idea to the market and ask them what their life is like for the last 5 years since they made their product and they're trying to get it launched. But you haven't done that. So this supports the assertion that the magnitude of change correlates with the level of resistance. So again, if resistance is low, what's the true value? I repeat, effectiveness is lost through direction instead of giving a true destination. Imagine your spouse comes home and says, honey, got a surprise trip and you're going to be behind the wheel. Get behind the wheel. We're going right now. Don't ask any questions. I am not telling you where we're going. And I'm going to give you directions step by step. Turn here, keep straight, etc. Go 10 miles. Make a left. See, you feel if you were behind the wheel, you feel like a sense of accomplishment each turn. Ooh, turn left. Okay. All right. We turn left. All right. What next? All right, cool. It's exciting. They're easy. This low hanging fruit, left turn, right turn, obey the speed limit if you do that. But how long do you enjoy that process before you wind up Ice Cube? Are we there yet? Where are we going? And that's what's happening to people following the wrong leadership. And eventually they pick their head up out the sand and they say, wait a minute, what are we doing? Where are we going? Humans tend to seek the most reward for the least effort, making it difficult to deviate from familiar paths, as we've covered. So people resist change because they prefer comfort and stability. Now, fear of the unknown, right? Loss of status and disruption of routines are common reasons for resistance. And all of that is what you get when you introduce people to real change. So again, if you don't have any resistance, you're not making a real impact. People are more likely to resist change that threaten their comfort zones or perceived stability. So, wrapping up, there's a lot of talk about how, low resistance is associated with perceived success. Yet, you saw how that failed in DEI. It wasn't the DEI program that caused climate change at public places. It was the cashback bonus incentives offered by the government. And you saw that as soon as they stripped part of it away, now you had a polarization. All this time that it's been implemented, if it had really created a change and had an impact, you wouldn't have had the contest that you just saw when they talked about getting rid of it. People were actually like, okay, good, we don't need it, cancel. So there was no major impact. It was a cashback bonus offer, just like a tax back rebate. And surprise, you were the token, right? So let many believe that they are making an impact and are fooled by there being no real progress. So what I want you to think about is when change is perceived as incremental or aligned with existing practices, like, well, we kind of already do this, then the resistance is minimized and success is more likely to be achieved. The problem is that increments is small little teeny tiny baby steps. You want your carrots, little one, yeah, right? But we don't got time for little baby steps sometimes in life. Sometimes you have to make serious, significant improvements, and you have no time or very little time to do it in. And that's where everything that these people have taught you crumbles because it doesn't work, as we proved in this video today. What Pasha Paroh produces is voltage. It's the potential difference, implying that the generation of energy or force is necessary to drive change. In this metaphor, resistance acts as the opposing force, reducing the effectiveness and a call for a greater power to overcome the resistance, effectively expressing the voltage to be applied to create change.